There's a certain kind of chemistry you simply cannot fake on a film set. And when a project carries the name and legacy of the king of pop himself, that chemistry becomes even more important, because everyone involved knows the whole world will be watching, judging and comparing every single frame to the man they remember. Today, we're diving deep into the funniest, strangest, and most heartwarming behind-the-scenes moments, from the making of the Michael Jackson biopic, the stories that never made it into the trailers, the chaos that unfolded when cameras weren't rolling, and the surprising bonds that formed between a cast trying to bring one of the most scrutinized life stories in entertainment history to the big screen. The search for a king. Before a single scene could be shot, the production faced an almost impossible task, finding someone who could convincingly step into the shoes of the most famous entertainer who ever lived. The search reportedly stretched across roughly 2 years and involved evaluating literally thousands of hopeful candidates from around the world, with director Antoine Fuqua and producer Graham King looking for far more than just a passing physical resemblance. They needed someone who could match Michael's vocal range, his stage presence, and the emotional complexity that made him so magnetic in the first place. The search eventually landed somewhere fittingly close to home, right inside the Jackson family tree itself, on Jaafar Jackson, Michael's own nephew and the son of Jermaine Jackson, making his feature film debut in one of the most high-pressure roles in modern cinema. Think about the sheer audacity of that casting decision for a moment. You're not just hiring an actor. You're essentially asking a family member who grew up idolizing his uncle to recreate that same uncle's most iconic, most scrutinized public moments, all while millions of fans worldwide are ready to pounce on the smallest inaccuracy. The chimp that stole the scene. Now let's get to one of the moments that genuinely sounds like it belongs in a blooper reel rather than a serious biopic. During filming of a scene depicting a young Michael at home with his parents, Catherine and Joe Jackson, the production brought in a chimpanzee to play Bubbles, Michael's real-life pet chimp who became almost as famous as Michael himself back in the day. According to reports circulating from the set, during what was supposed to be a fairly serious rehearsal, the chimp playing Bubbles apparently mimicked one of Jaafar's facial expressions, completely unprompted. Nice. And the reaction from the cast was instant. The entire crew reportedly burst into laughter so hard that filming had to stop for several minutes, just so everyone could compose themselves. Nobody's entirely sure what specific expression set things off, whether it was a raised eyebrow, a smirk, or some classic Michael-style head tilt that Jaafar had been perfecting for months. But the image, alone, on a professional film set, grinding to a complete halt because an animal actor decided to do impressions, is exactly the kind of chaotic magic that makes behind-the-scenes footage so much fun to watch. It's a small moment, but it also tells you something real about the atmosphere on set. Despite the enormous pressure riding on this production, there was clearly room for genuine, spontaneous joy breaking through the tension. Grandma's seal of approval. Here's a story that's less laugh-out-loud funny and more wholesome enough to make you smile, but it's worth including because it set the tone for everything that followed. Casting Jaafar wasn't simply a creative decision made in a boardroom. It required real, personal buy-in from Michael's own mother, Catherine Jackson, the matriarch of the entire family. Before filming could move forward, the production sought her blessing directly. And she reportedly gave it, stating publicly that her grandson genuinely embodied her late son's spirit, his fluid movement, and his complete devotion to performance. For a family that had spent decades fiercely protecting Michael's public image, that kind of open public endorsement was a genuinely big deal. And you can imagine the sigh of relief that rippled through the entire production once Grandma gave her stamp of approval. It's the kind of behind-the-scenes detail that doesn't show up in any trailer but probably meant more to the cast and crew than almost anything else that happened during production, because it gave everyone permission to actually relax a little and trust the process. Moving into Michael's old house. If you want to talk about full method acting commitment, this next story might be the most extreme example from the entire production. To prepare for the role, Jaafar reportedly relocated to the actual Jackson family estate at Havenhurst in Encino, California, living inside the residence for months, surrounded by childhood memories, quiet private spaces, and personal family heirlooms rather than relying purely on archival footage and old interviews. Now, picture the logistics of that for a second. This isn't renting an Airbnb near set to stay in character. This is moving into your literal uncle's childhood home, complete with all the ghosts, memories, and family history that come with it, just to nail a performance. Reportedly, watching a young relative walk those same hallways while adopting Michael's soft voice and body language brought back genuinely intense waves of nostalgia and grief for the family, blurring the line between traditional acting exercises and something that started to feel more like real emotional reenactment. It's not exactly a funny story in the traditional sense, but there's something almost surreal and darkly comic about the mental image of Jaafar wandering around a legendary mansion at 2 a.m., practicing his uncle's soft-spoken interview voice, while the family ghosts, figuratively speaking, watched on the detective's wall. Speaking of commitment bordering on the slightly unhinged, here's a detail that sounds like something straight out of a crime thriller rather than a movie prep routine. Inside his private workspace at Havenhurst, Jaafar reportedly built an enormous research wall that looked, in his own words apparently, more like a detective's investigation room than a standard actor's prep space. We're talking personal letters written by Michael, private journals, handwritten song lyrics, philosophical notes, and detailed timelines cross-referencing global historical events with major career milestones, all pinned up and connected like he was trying to solve a mystery rather than just play a role. Just imagine walking into that room for the first time as a crew member and seeing an entire wall covered in string, photographs, and handwritten notes about the making of Thriller and Bad. You'd probably do a double take and wonder if you'd wandered onto the set of a completely different movie about a conspiracy theorist. But by all accounts, that obsessive level of preparation genuinely impressed both crew members and the notoriously protective estate handlers, signaling from day one that this biopic was aiming for something with real depth and respect, rather than a surface-level tribute act. Blood, sweat, and the moonwalk. Now let's talk about the physical toll, because recreating Michael Jackson's legendary choreography turned into a genuinely brutal ordeal for someone with zero prior professional acting or stunt experience before signing on to this film. Jaafar reportedly spent somewhere between 10 and 12 hours a day in the dance studio, running through complex footwork, rapid spins, and of course, the single most iconic move in pop culture history, over and over again, to the point where his feet ended up blistered, swollen, and bloody. That's not a small detail to gloss over. Imagine training that hard every single day for months, knowing that millions of fans across the globe have every single one of Michael's moves memorized down to the exact frame, ready to spot the tiniest inconsistency the moment the trailer drops. There's something almost comically brutal about picturing a first-time actor limping out of rehearsal every night, feet wrapped in bandages, all in pursuit of perfecting a dance move that Michael himself apparently made look completely effortless, winning over the skeptics. Mastering that choreography required direct instruction from people who had actually shared the stage with Michael himself, and the production brought in veteran choreographers Rich and Tony Talluega, who had spent years touring and filming music videos alongside the king of pop. Here's the twist, though. Early on, these veteran choreographers reportedly expressed serious, genuine doubts about whether anyone, even a talented family member, could truly duplicate Michael's precise rhythmic timing and natural kinetic instinct. Picture that awkward first rehearsal. For a second, two men who spent years literally dancing next to Michael Jackson, watching his nephew attempt to recreate those exact same moves, arms crossed, clearly unconvinced. That's about as intimidating a dance class as you could possibly imagine. Rather than backing down from that pressure, Jaafar reportedly requested additional evening practice sessions, pushing through serious physical exhaustion to close the gap, and his relentless drive slowly turned those early doubts into genuine artistic confidence. There's something genuinely satisfying about that arc. The skeptical old-school professionals slowly transforming from arms-crossed doubters into believers, one grueling late-night rehearsal at a time. The cinematographer who vanished. Not every behind-the-scenes surprise was a heartwarming one, and this next story falls firmly into chaotic Hollywood drama territory. Right around the start of pre-production, legendary Academy Award-winning cinematographer Robert Richardson, who had been brought on specifically to establish the movie's entire visual style, Awesome suddenly exited the project due to severe scheduling conflicts tied to industry-wide labor delays. Losing your chief cinematographer that close to the start of principal photography is the filmmaking equivalent of your head chef quitting the night before a huge dinner party. Producer Graham King and director Antoine Fuqua reportedly scrambled fast, securing fellow Oscar winner Dion Beebe as an immediate replacement, who then had to jump straight onto an active, high-pressure production without any standard prep time, simultaneously designing lighting for massive concert recreations and much more intimate dramatic scenes. It's a wild behind-the-scenes reminder that even the most polished, glossy final films are often held together by frantic, last-minute scrambling that audiences never see, when Hollywood itself shut down. As if losing a cinematographer mid-prep wasn't chaotic enough, the entire production then ground to a complete halt when Hollywood was hit by the historic industry-wide SAG-AFTRA and WGA strikes. Originally scheduled to begin filming in mid-2023, the movie instead sat in limbo for months, with hundreds of cast and crew members left waiting around after already completing months of intense prep work. Meanwhile, Jaafar reportedly had to keep grinding through his brutal physical regimen, vocal conditioning, and dance training the entire time, with absolutely no idea when the cameras would actually start rolling. Just imagine training your body to physical exhaustion every single day for months, prepping to play one of the most physically demanding roles in Hollywood history, and then just waiting and waiting, with zero clarity on when it would actually matter. When filming finally kicked off on January 22nd, 2024, it wasn't just a relief. It was practically a miracle that the entire project hadn't quietly fallen apart during the wait. The legal landmine nobody saw coming. Here's where the story takes its strangest turn of all. After principal photography had already wrapped, attorneys reviewing the finished footage reportedly uncovered a binding legal clause buried inside a confidential 1993 settlement tied to an old accuser. A clause that strictly prohibited any commercial film from depicting that individual or dramatizing the specific legal claims connected to that original case. The problem? The entire third act of the original screenplay apparently revolved directly around the fallout from those very allegations. Picture the studio executive's reaction when this got discovered after the movie had already been shot. That's not a small continuity error you can quietly patch in editing. That's discovering your entire final act is legally radioactive after you've already spent the money to film it. The studio was reportedly forced to throw out the completed climax entirely and rebuild the ending completely from scratch, which honestly sounds less like a movie production and more like a legal thriller happening in real time behind the cameras. The footage nobody will ever see. Among the finished scenes reportedly scrapped entirely because of that legal landmine was an elaborate, fully constructed dramatic sequence recreating a real 1993 law enforcement raid at Neverland Ranch, complete with reconstructed sets, police cruisers rolling through the gates with flashing lights, and Michael sitting alone inside, reflecting on his public downfall. That sequence was apparently meant to be the emotional low point of the entire film, and the production had gone to the trouble of meticulously rebuilding large portions of Neverland just to shoot it. And then, because of the legal restrictions, every single frame reportedly had to be permanently deleted. Just sit with that for a second. An entire expensive, emotionally significant set piece, fully filmed, fully edited, and then wiped from existence forever because of a decades-old legal clause nobody thought to double-check until after the cameras had already stopped rolling. That's the kind of behind-the-scenes story that sounds almost too dramatic to be real, and yet here we are. The emergency 22-day sprint. With the original ending completely thrown out, the studio reportedly launched an emergency reshoot operation in June 2025, reassembling key cast and crew to write, stage, and shoot a brand new third act in just 22 days. Screenwriter John Logan reportedly worked around the clock rewriting the narrative, shifting the story's timeline to end earlier, on the massive artistic triumph of the 1988 Bad World Tour instead. In just over 3 weeks, the team apparently had to rebuild vast stadium stages, manufacture hundreds of period-accurate costumes, and lock down international actor availability on incredibly short notice, all while director Antoine Fuqua shot at a breakneck pace, trying to make sure the brand new footage visually matched material filmed more than a year earlier. If you've ever tried to plan literally anything on a tight deadline, imagine doing that at the scale of rebuilding entire concert stadiums in 3 weeks, with the whole world waiting to see if you'd pull it off. The budget rumor mill. Naturally, once word got out that the film needed emergency reshoots, Hollywood trade outlets went into a bit of a frenzy. Initial press leaks apparently claimed the reshoots had tacked on a staggering $50 million to the budget, painting a picture of a production spinning completely out of control. Detailed follow-up reporting eventually corrected those numbers, revealing the actual added cost was somewhere between $10 and $15 million, with the Michael Jackson estate itself reportedly stepping in to help cover those extra costs directly. Still, even with the corrected numbers, it's a pretty funny illustration of how fast rumors can spiral in Hollywood. $50 million of chaos turning out to be a much more modest, though still very real, financial headache. A budget built for superheroes. By the time every delay, strike, and emergency reshoot got factored in, the final price tag for this musical biopic reportedly climbed somewhere between $155 million and $200 million, a budget size normally reserved for superhero blockbusters, not a movie about one man's life and music. That's the kind of number that turns "will people like this movie" into "will people like this movie enough" to save the studio from a genuinely enormous financial gamble. Wildfire chaos at the writer's desk. As if legal landmines and emergency reshoots weren't enough drama for one production screenwriter, John Logan reportedly had his own Southern California home caught directly in the path of a devastating wildfire while he was in the middle of frantically rewriting the film's entire ending under intense studio pressure. Trying to process the sudden loss of personal belongings and property while simultaneously hitting a brutal studio deadline is the kind of stress test most people never have to face, even once in their careers, let alone in the middle of the most chaotic rewrite of their professional life. The sibling divide. Even with full backing from the Michael Jackson estate, involvement from Michael's 3 children apparently varied wildly. His eldest son, Prince Jackson, reportedly stepped directly onto set as an active executive producer, showing up to daily shoots and supporting his cousin Jaafar through the grueling schedule. Meanwhile, Michael's daughter Paris and youngest son Biggie reportedly chose not to participate in the making of the film at all, highlighting some very real, very human differences within the family about how their father's complicated legacy should be portrayed on screen. Paris in particular became a bit of a lightning rod during press coverage, reportedly voicing concerns after reviewing an early draft of the screenplay, and eventually distancing herself entirely from the project when her suggested changes weren't incorporated. The awkward interview correction: here's a small but genuinely amusing footnote in the whole saga. During early press rounds, actor Coleman Domingo, who plays family patriarch Joe Jackson, reportedly suggested in an interview that Paris and Prince were fully united behind the film. Paris apparently wasted no time publicly correcting that claim, clarifying that it didn't accurately reflect her actual feelings or involvement. There's something almost sitcom-worthy about the image of a cast member confidently misspeaking about family unity in an interview, only to get a swift public correction from the person actually being talked about. It's a small moment, but it perfectly captures just how delicate managing a real family's real feelings can be when the whole world is watching every single press appearance for cracks in the narrative, cutting a 4-hour movie down to size. When director Antoine Fuqua assembled his first full cut of the film, the runtime reportedly blew past an incredible 4 hours, thanks to the sheer volume of archival research, full concert recreations, and dramatic storylines packed into the production. Studio executives apparently even briefly toyed with the idea of releasing the whole thing as 2 separate theatrical films just to avoid losing any of that footage. Ultimately, they settled on a single release, forcing the editing team to trim the film all the way down to 2 hours and 35 minutes, cutting over 90 minutes of finished footage, including entire musical numbers and secondary storylines. Just imagine spending months, maybe years, perfecting scenes, only to watch them get sliced out entirely because the movie simply couldn't run 4 hours in regular theaters. A trailer that broke the internet. After years of setbacks, legal drama, wildfires, and family tension, the movie's first official teaser trailer finally dropped, and it delivered an absolutely massive win. The brief trailer reportedly generated over 30 million views in its first 6 hours alone, surging past 116 million views within just 24 hours, shattering existing studio records to become the most watched trailer debut in the studio's history. After everything this production went through behind the scenes, that kind of explosive public reception feels like a genuinely satisfying payoff. Proof that global fascination with Michael Jackson's story remained as strong as ever, no matter how much chaos was happening behind the cameras the whole time, wrapping it all up. So there you have it. The funniest, strangest, and most chaotic behind-the-scenes stories from the making of this incredibly ambitious biopic, from a scene-stealing chimpanzee and a family matriarch's blessing, all the way through legal landmines, wildfire chaos, and a record-shattering trailer debut. Which one of these surprised you the most? Do you think the chimp genuinely stole the scene? Or do you think there's an even funnier story we haven't heard yet? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the drama behind the drama, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes breakdowns just like this one.